evening, everybody. Call the meeting of Ames Planning and Zoning September 4th, 2019 meeting. We'll call that to order. Begin with the introduction of commission members.
Ruth Holstrom.
John Emery.
Doug Regaller.
Carol Spencer.
Item number 3, the approval of tonight's agenda. Any additions or changes?
I move approval.
I'd second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item number 4, approval of the minutes from the August 21st meeting. Any corrections or additions to those? Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Item number 5, public forum. Opportunity for anyone in the crowd or in the audience to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda. All right. Moving on to item number 6, a public hearing for the amendment to the adaptive reuse for 2501 Grand Avenue.
Good evening, Commission. As you mentioned, this is an amendment to the adaptive reuse plan for the North Grand Mall and an approval of a major site development plan for a fast food restaurant at 2501 Grand Avenue. And 2501 Grand Avenue includes Lot 2, as you see on this graphic, with the boundaries here in this black boulder line. So it includes all of the buildings south of the original mall building, except for the Kohl's building and the Kohl's parking lot. And the location for this proposed restaurant is here inside this red box. Former location of Kentucky Fried Chicken years ago, and it is shown on the 2012 adaptive reuse plan as the future restaurant site G. And so there's been a restaurant planned here for some time. As you look at the site plan that was submitted and as you overlay it on this plan, it's just north of the Quick Shop and south of Fazoli's, which is here. And you can see the building orientation here, east to west, with the parking lot to the south of the building and a drive-through lane that goes around the north side. The building elevations, the entrance on the south side looks like so. It's a Bebop's restaurant, and it will have indoor seating, outdoor seating, and drive-through. So the indoor seating is something new from what the one has on South Dove. And as you look at the building facade, there's brick here with this darker gray symbol, and then the glass block on the corner, and then windows here, and with the main entrance to the south, and the sign above. There's a canopy that runs across here, just below the sign, and there's metal panels here shown in white, these horizontal metal panels. And as you look at the elevation on the opposite side, the north side, where the drive-through is, same type of design with the brick accents and the glass block accent windows for the area where the patrons will be sitting inside. And then here's the drive-through window. And the rooftop equipment will be hidden by parapet, so you won't see the rooftop equipment. That will be screened, which is a zoning requirement. And then as you look at the front elevation, which is facing to the west, again, you'll see the glass here for the area where the seating will be, a door, a glass block again, and the brick highlights. So it's consistent from one side to the next. And then this is the side that will face Grand Avenue. Again, with more brick on this side and then the metal panels in the middle. As we look at the site plan, again, here's the building. And then there's a walkway with an outdoor seating area here, a walkway here and here. The walkway extends out and connects with the bike path that runs along Grand. And staff is suggesting that this walkway be extended to the edge of the paved drive aisle here that is off this site, so that customers can come across the drive aisle and have the sidewalk there that connects them so they can walk to the entrance. There's no parking there now, but that they're proposing actually more parking spaces than what's required by the ratio at the mall site, which is 4 spaces per 1,000, and even more than is required for fast food restaurant. So there are 25 parking spaces, 22 in this lot, and then there will be 3 spaces added over here, which is outside the area that will be leased for this development. And that's a drive aisle today, but it will no longer be needed as a drive aisle. So they're creating 3 more spaces there. And so there's adequate parking for this type of use. Landscaping, the 2012 adaptive reuse plan did not show any landscaping on this site. But since that plan was adopted, the landscape requirements have changed, and the developer is working to comply with those landscape standards that we have today. There's front yard landscaping along here. There's front yard landscaping and parking lot landscaping that's required. And in the front yard landscaping here along Grand Avenue, there's 4 trees required. They've got the 4 trees. And then for the parking lot, there's 7 trees by today's standards required. And they show 4 here and then another one here. So if they added 2 more trees, they would meet the requirements today. And they have various options where that could be a possibility. They could add a tree possibly here and here, or they could add understory trees over here, ornamental trees, a couple, or they could create another island in the parking lot for a couple trees, since they have more than the required parking. There's also requirements for shrubs and grasses, and there's some substitutions allowed between those, and they've met those minimum standards for the front yard parking, or front yard landscaping. For the parking lot landscaping, it's only the trees that are required. Other than the 2 trees that are not shown here for the parking lot, they've complied with the rest of the landscaping requirements by today's standards. Circulation, as you look at the drive aisle, there isn't a minimum number of stacking spaces for a drive-through, but typically we look for 5 spaces between the menu board and the window. And they have that here, and then they have 3 or 4 additional spaces in here, and they have room to even extend out on their site without interfering with traffic on the rest of the mall site. And so there's adequate room for the stacking or queuing of vehicles. The circulation in the parking lot, they've got the minimum required dimensions for the drive aisles and for the parking spaces. So that meets what the zoning code says. And then over here, there is trash enclosure, and it's actually in the front yard. There's a minimum setback required for this area of 50 feet, and the trash enclosure is 10 feet back from the property line. So the city council will have to approve a waiver to allow that in the front yard. But that's not something that the commission has to deal with, but that is something that we'll bring to the city council when this goes forward. And with that, as the Planning and Housing Department, we recommend approval, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I don't have the alternative one listed.
And the second page didn't make it.
Yeah, I think the even pages didn't make it to the hard copy packet.
Yeah, there's some gaps in the hard copy.
Yeah. I have a question regarding the trash enclosure. Do we know what material that's going to be made
I didn't-
out of or comprised
I noticed I
of?
don't have it either. Just go straight to page 3.
It's I think it's
3.
vertical wood boards
Okay.
that are 6 feet high.
Lori placed up there a full copy right there if you're looking for it.
Any other questions for staff at all?
I do have, are you planning on having anything for, any requirements for bicycles? Like we talked about last time?
So those won't be in effect when this is approved. That was not a mandatory bike parking ordinance. It was if you provide them, you could reduce parking. So there's no requirements for bike parking with this project.
Are we planning on getting bike parking then?
I don't believe there's any proposed on the plan. Staff has not requested it.
With the trash enclosure kind of encroaching into that front yard, did staff encourage the applicant to consider using a more permanent material aside from the vertical wood board potentially? I guess I have some concerns with it being kind of right along Grand there. If something happens to that trash enclosure, say if a trash collector happens to accidentally back into it or something like that, or the wood, with that being comprised potentially of wood, I feel like it's not going to necessarily hold up great, and it's very prominent along Grand there, so I guess I'd have some concerns about the look over time.
So I think, so we didn't explore materials with the applicant. If the commission's interested, I'm sure they can look at including other materials to both improve the aesthetics and possibly the durability.
Okay.
I think we used on the other adaptive reuse plan that you just saw to the north of here, they had a trash enclosure that was also in the front setback. The materials were more complementary of the architecture of the building rather than just a board enclosure. So obviously it could be treated differently because of its visibility.
Additional questions? Anyone care to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Are you guys' mics on? Because we're not hearing you very well in the back.
Yeah, they're all on.
We'll try to be closer to them. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
Right here.
Scott Renault with Fox Engineering representing the owner who's, we have an owner and then we have an applicant. So the owner is represents the property owner, and then the applicant represents Bebops. normally there's a detail of our dumpster enclosure on here, and that for some reason there's not. I was looking for that. And we do not use wood board. We use a composite deck plank that doesn't rot. The only thing we have a little issue with that sometimes is the colors tend to fade or blend out over time, but we've been using those because those wood fences don't last very long. So we use a treated board fence. We have heavy duty iron pillars in the front for the doors, so they are maintained. They're not hinges. They're actually mounted on a pole, and then we use a composite deck and we can get different colors for that. One of the reasons that we're located where we're at is our neighbor is not our neighbor. I don't know if you can see
Kind
that.
of dark.
Kind of dark. I don't know if shine a light on it there, rear or something, but our neighbor has a dumpster location there already. So this is the back end of our neighbor. So our dumpster actually screens this dumpster enclosure there, which is wood and faded and not very good looking. So from our standpoint it's just a good place to put it to try to blend out and screen out the rest of it. So we want it to look good as well. So I'm not concerned about that. Any other questions for?
It looks like the door,
But they're not getting garbage at the same time the store is open. So these are early morning, or these are almost always early morning. Almost any business can prescribe when they want the garbage truck to come based on what their business hours are. So yeah, that's true.
just might want to bring something up to somebody so the things don't blow open into the.
Well, no, that's why we have a more substantial, where we have a different gate in the way those work.
Okay.
And that's just a kind of a diagram that we put in there. There's actually two things in there. There's a dumpster, and then there's a tank itself. So there's actually two doors in there. Sometimes we don't put two doors in, we put a single door in and have it swing a certain direction, so.
And that is going to be fully screened from Grand Avenue.
It's screened from all sides with the gates.
Anything further? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I mean, I guess it'd be nice to see something, especially along Grand there. I've seen the composite deck kind of planking, and it doesn't look bad necessarily, but it definitely isn't anything that's real nice looking. So I don't even know if like additional landscaping would potentially help. I understand that the trash enclosure next door obviously already existing, but it'd be nice to not see.
When the trees grow up, it will screen it.
Yeah.
Right. I think
Take
it
a
will
bit of time.
definitely cover some of it anyways. So I think that will help.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council approve the adaptive reuse major site development plan for 2501 Grand Avenue with a condition to provide 2 additional overstory trees to meet current parking lot landscaping standards.
Have a motion. Anyone care to second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
To be clear, we're doing alternative 1.
Alternative 1, yes.
Alternative one.
I'm sorry if I didn't say that.
So,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. This will move to council.
Yeah, so go to city council on the September 24th meeting date.
All right, item number 7, public hearing for the rezone with master plan for 509 and 511 Lincoln Way.
So just for clarity, it appears that, again, the same reproduction, you skip even pages. So do you have that available also, Lori, to So if we can take a second, I'm going to go run this for you so you have all of the materials.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
We're going to take a short 2-minute break to redistribute copies to the commission.
So now, my packet does have page 2.
The item for staff. Thank you. The application, this item is for a rezoning proposed from the existing downtown gateway commercial zoning located at 509 and 511 Lincoln Way. This is the corner of Clark and Lincoln Way. Rezoning from downtown gateway commercial to highway oriented commercial. For a proposed, with a master plan for a proposed drive-through coffee shop. The applicant, Chuck Winkleblack, he's representing WS Properties LLC. Just quick location and then a bit of background. So here is the location right here, Clark and Lincoln Way, the northwest corner. This is the former KFC and Taco Time location. About a year ago, the new downtown gateway commercial zoning took effect in this area along Lincoln Way. That was the result of the adoption of the Lincoln Way Corridor Plan, which also provided policy support in the LUPP to rezone this area to downtown gateway commercial. So the primary focus of that area was from Clark eastward through Kellogg, which was the core of it, over to Duff on the east end. The proposal is to rezone, as you see there, to HOC with the master plan. And the master plan is for the drive-through coffee shop design that you see there. This reasoning for this is to allow for this particular type of drive-through and parking lot design, which is currently not permitted in the DGC standards. Right now, parking and driveways or drive-throughs rather between buildings and main streets in the DGC standards are prohibited, as it's fosters a walk-up design at the street. So the applicant is proposing this design as they believe that it fits the needs of the prospective operator of the coffee shop. Staff has had discussions with the applicant. We did look at 2 different layouts. This is the applicant's preferred layout. We looked at this one. We also looked at a second one, which was designed under the current DGC standards, which had the drive-through and parking drive-through loop design in the rear of the building, behind the building, with the parking contained back there as well. The proposal with the master plan, as you can see there, we have put into the language that adoption of a master plan would allow for office, retail, and restaurant recreational trade uses, with the single access point from Lincoln Way and access point from Gilchrist. It would be otherwise restricted to those 3 use types only. The existing drive-through design can stay under the new downtown gateway commercial zoning. The standards in the DGC allow for 1 drive-through per block face. So as this was a pre-existing drive-through, this would be able to be maintained in this area. So it could maintain this type of look as it had for many years prior under the former HOC, Highway Oriented Commercial design. The master plan does reflect a general flow, traffic flow to the site that is deemed to be safe as far as queuing goes in a drive-through situation in terms of entering off Lincoln Way. Obviously, a much lower amount of traffic anticipated off Gilchrist to the north, so there would be a lower level of queuing there. And I can take any questions at this point if you have any.
Any questions for staff?
No, one question I have is they're going to feed back out onto Lincoln Way too?
So based on this proposed design, it's not anticipated that that would be an issue. You would be able to enter off Lincoln Way, but the way that they have the design oriented, you would be able to fit quite a few cars, approximately 14 to 17 vehicles, at least in a queuing capacity, which could be seen to be adequate to not cause problems on Lincoln Way.
Well, I'm talking about when they exit.
Yes, they'll have the ability to exit on Lincoln Way as well.
And they'll have the ability to cross traffic, go across the eastbound traffic, will have the ability to turn in there too?
That'll be up to DOT. So the DOT has to approve the access permit, and if they believe there's too many conflicts on the roadway, they can install medians if that's physically possible.
And that's how
So
far?
It's not legal. It's not legal to cross two yellow doubled lines. That would be the first answer. But if it became an issue that DOT got concerned about, then they would have to look at what it meant for a median.
Because they got the median down there to keep it from going across into the Lincoln Town Center or whatever it's called.
The Hy-Vee Center?
Correct.
Yeah, Hy-Vee Center.
Yeah.
Question, where in the process would DOT make that, any kind of a recommendation?
They won't make a recommendation. They will issue their own permit or deny their
but
own
when?
permit. Typically, when we get an actual application, we route it for their comments, and normally they'll provide them to us, and we'll make the applicant aware of what's going to be expected by DOT of them, so it can get coordinated with the city permitting process. If for some reason that does not happen, and DOT does not choose to be involved at the beginning, the applicant will have to pursue that separately on their own outside of the city's approval process to get a DOT permit. And if it conflicted with one of our approvals, then they would have to come back to us and amend their permit. Normally, it's all done together.
From the applicant's perspective, worst case DOT says, no, we're going to put a median in there. Might that actually impact the design that we're looking at right now?
I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Okay,
My guess is they wouldn't pursue the project if there was a median.
all right, thank you.
Any further questions for staff?
I guess the city is going to concur with bringing traffic back out of there onto Lincoln Way?
Yes, yes. So when our traffic engineer looked at it, when we did the kickoff meeting, looked at different designs for considering what has been there in the past and what can go back in there. Moving the driveways over to the west as far as possible is desirable. Eliminating driveways is desirable. And in the totality of the project, the traffic engineer believed that it was approvable with both an entrance and an exit onto Lincoln Way, along with the Gilcrest access.
So they're reusing the old cave?
No.
No, okay, so this is.
this would, you can't quite see it on here. It's kind of the photos ghosted out a little bit on the
Okay.
aerial, but it's not the existing building. It's in
Okay.
between the Taco Time building and the current building. And this isn't the exact site plan. This is just for communicating what the expectations are going forward.
Okay.
So for example, that doesn't meet front yard landscaping requirements, so there would have to be substantial changes along Clark and Lincoln Way.
Certainly.
But it's to generally make the point of
Yep.
about what they're trying
So the general intent is to show that there's a single point of access. It will be positioned in the best way possible to mitigate the queuing back onto the street. That's the number one issue for us. It is not the exiting. It's the queuing, the stacking across the sidewalk, and then back into the street itself.
I have how about those trees on the east side of the drive going in? Is that going to provide blocking of traffic? The sight line?
We allow trees in our vision triangles. It's something we can look at if there's an odd grade change or some kind of slope to the driveway. That's always something that we can look at.
Well, I'm just saying that that's going to be a very busy corner. Do we need trees there?
We need trees. It doesn't mean it needs
Well, I
to be
know
a
we
side
need
vision
trees.
triangle. So that's a detail we'll work out as staff. I mean, you're not approving the landscape plan tonight. You're just approving whether the project can
Zoning.
proceed.
So the landscape plan to come back to us?
Nope, you will not see this project. It would be a staff approval. If you rezone it to HOC, the use that they're proposing is a permitted use, staff review only.
And it's going to be a single story, no residence or anything above.
Correct.
Any other comments or questions for staff? Anyone from the applicant?
Good evening, Chuck Winkleblack, Hunziker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Both of the buildings that are there are in disrepair is probably the kindest thing to say about both of those properties. If you look at, this has street on three sides of it, which makes it challenging. So we're kind of dealing with three front yards. So we're going from 6 access points that are there currently, 2 on Lincoln Way, 2 on Clark, at least 2 on Clark, and 2 on Gilchrist. So from the traffic engineer's perspective, this is much simpler and much cleaner. We've already been talking, had discussions with the DOT, and of what we've showed them, this is their preferred design. Our engineer has some more work to do with them, but this gets the driveway the furthest away from the intersection, which is their goal, is to get that as far back. Their bigger concern, just like city staff's concern, was not making sure there's adequate queuing. So as people are coming in, there's plenty of storage for cars on site. The only reason that we're here changing from the DGC back to HOC, and that's when we had our kickoff meeting with city staff, and staff suggested that this might be one way to deal with that, is that the DGC does not allow any parking between the building and the street. And so to get to where you put the building clear up at the front and the drive-through and all the parking in the back of the property is just not something that the intended user felt was viable, to have all the parking and the drive-through be at the farthest point away from the property. The other thing, as we look at the DGC and the other project we've been talking about for a couple of years further to the east of here, we're trying to avoid, Starbucks is a reluctant participant in this process. The owner does not live in the country even, so it's taken us a while to establish communications, come to some kind of resolution. What we're trying to avoid is what you see out west on Lincoln Way, where we have one little house sitting in the middle of a larger apartment project that's an existing building. What's likely to happen on Lincoln Way will be stories that have some verticality to it, 4 to 6, maybe 8 stories. That's not been determined yet. But to have one single story, 2,000 square foot building right square in the middle of the block does not appeal to staff or anybody else that we've talked about with this project. So that's the reason that we're here tonight, trying to accommodate allowing the hole in the donut to the 2 blocks to the east to be filled in, so that that can be a consistent, coherent project, and move the Starbucks, which does have a lot of traffic, whether they come in off Gilchrist and work their way around, or come in and leave Lincoln Way. The KFC, again, probably a different volume, but they emptied back out. Taco Time was kind of one way, but if you parked in the first few stalls, you could get out of there. But again, the preliminary discussions that we've had with the DOT is that they like the fact whenever they lose access points on to their road, that's a good thing for them. And moving it as far west as possible is also good. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chuck?
Is there going to be a sidewalk along Clark?
Yes, there's a big sidewalk along, there's like a 6 or 8 foot sidewalk that's along Clark already that will stay as part of the plan.
And then a walkway into the front
Correct.
over to the,
Yep. again, this is not a final site plan, but of the intended, the ones that we've done, this is the one that the staff, the end user and the DOT have come together and said this seems to make the most sense for the site.
You understand what my questions were about the sight line with those two trees?
We talk about trees and Kelly's trees, we affectionately call them. So, but we understand the sight line, and there's also a big traffic signal controller that's in the front yard that's
Yeah.
probably as problematic for sight as anything there. But yeah, we're well aware of what landscaping can do and the impacts it makes on the sight triangle at the corners.
I'm wondering, I mean, I know this is, again, just for the, like, rezoning of this particular property, but I'm wondering when this kind of, in terms of parking requirements and such, if there's any way to, again, as the project potentially moves forward, try to dress up the corner a little bit to try and, I guess, mitigate the fact that there's going to be now potentially parking along that Clark side. Again, just my 2 cents. Just
Understood.
because
And
the
that will
intention,
likely-
obviously, of the
We've
prior
already
zoning
talked to
district
the
was.
traffic engineer would like a little more room because if the traffic signal gets replaced, he's talked about a bigger easement there for whatever potential traffic signals will be in the future. It's kind of raised up there now. What's there is not what I'd call really nice looking stuff, but the site triangle and the limitations we have
Right.
from the city and the traffic engineer there, certainly, but there will be landscaping and stuff. We know that that's all part of the project.
Anything further?
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience care to speak on the project?
My name's Joe Ripito. I live at 1317 Kenyon Circle in Ames. I will give you the conclusion first and then explain why. Anything that would allow drive-through, any action that would allow drive-through at such a busy location should be viewed as a complete reversal of all the progress that was made in the Lincoln Way Corridor Plan. This is just not a suitable location for drive-through. Let me give you a little bit of history of why I'm interested in this. Some of you will recall, maybe all of you will recall that in 2013, the city council was faced with a controversial proposal that was to allow drive-through in Campustown. And they not only blocked that, it was part of that Kingland proposal. They not only blocked that, but they also voted in late 2013 for a complete study of our drive-through regulations to see how obsolete they were, how brief they were, what they didn't include. They were going to have staff do that study. And before I tell you what happened, I just want to read these 3 lines of our drive-through location regulations. It's only 3 lines. All drive-through facilities, whether primary or accessory uses, must comply with the following conditions. 1, setbacks and landscaping, stacking lanes and driveways, or parking lot areas for conformance to development standards. Stacking lanes for a drive-through facility must be set back at least 5 feet from all lot lines. Where the setback abuts a residential zone, the setback must be landscaped to at least the high screen standard. And number 2, design and layout. Stacking lanes must be designed to provide adequate on-site maneuvering, queuing, and circulation area so that stacking vehicles will neither impede traffic on abutting streets nor interfere with vehicle circulation. Now, that's what Kelly just mentioned his concern is. He doesn't want vehicles out in the street. I understand that. So that's one. The second one is don't build too close to the lot line. But there's nothing in here about providing for pedestrian safety. There's nothing in here about providing the free flow of people trying to get into a place without having to walk between idling drive-through cars. There's nothing about bicycle safety. There's nothing even about the concerns that some of you have already raised about what a busy traffic intersection this is. It says as long as the cars don't back in the street, you're good to go. So I think that's why the 2013 council wanted to review these regulations. Let me tell you what happened. In 2014, after that council passed it, the new council, slightly different, said that's kind of a low priority. We got a lot going on. We'll put it at the bottom of the pile. The 2015 council said, let's just scrap that all together on a 4-3 vote. And we could go into a lot of reasons as to why they might or might not have done that. May not have had totally to do with drive-through. May have been, at least in the view of one council member, that they didn't want anybody other than a property developer or corporation being able to request a zoning text amendment. I'm not sure which it is, but both of those things may have come into play. So anyway, we've got obsolete regulations compared to what a lot of communities are doing. And I can remember that one of the things that came up in there under questioning, I think Kelly answered this. He had said, well, yeah, the regulations haven't been looked at for a while. Yeah, they are kind of brief.
Excuse me, do you have anything more on this particular project, or are you gonna, I mean, we're not here
I'm
to.
coming to that. Do you have a time limit?
Another 30 seconds or so.
Well, let me put it this way. This is the worst possible drive-through design you can have, where it circulates around the building. All you got to do is look across the street at the Mayfair Cleaners and the Taco. If you had to walk with your driving through the drive-through lane to get to the front of the building. All right, I will try to summarize some other points since you're concerned about time. Consider the definition of pre-existing. This is not a pre-existing use. They are going to demolish the Kentucky Fried Chicken building. A pre-existing use is when you use what is there. So to say that this can skate through because there once was drive-through, that's not right. That's not right. That's not what pre-existing means. People spent hours and hours downtown corridor standards to eliminate, finally, it's the first progress we've made on drive-through since that case 5 years ago when we didn't make any progress. Finally, some limitations, finally, some regulations. And that is the trend. And let me just give you one final thought to prove that that's the trend. The Minneapolis City Council bans new drive-through operations in the city. This is 12 August 2019. 1 month ago. So we are moving in the wrong direction, folks, if we have yet another drive-through in this congested area. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Ryan Davis, 204 Clark. I'm to the northeast of the property. Commission members, on June 26, 2018, the Ames City Council passed the downtown gateway commercial zoning against the wishes of a majority of the property owners and even this commission. Why was that? We would all love to know whose agenda they were actually pursuing. That vote by the city council changed the way of life for 62 different properties and their owners. But this becomes a tale of be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. Mr. Winkleback had asked for this new zoning to build a $100 million project along Lincoln Way, putting greed in front of any repercussions. His $100 million project had several variations, one of which was putting Starbucks on the east side of Clark with the current downtown gateway zoning. Now, we're all here tonight to deal with his repercussions and to change two of his properties back to the original highway-oriented commercial. Mr. Winkleblack purchased these properties well after the change in zoning, and he knew exactly what he had to work with. Before he purchased these properties, he continued to market the KFC property as highway-oriented commercial, even after the zoning had been changed, knowing full well he could get the zoning reversed, showing just how much pull he has with city staff and our elected officials. But why is the zoning not good enough for the west side of Clark as it was for the east side? I have a few issues within what was brought up in the packet. The first was the original boundaries of the downtown gateway zone. It stated in your form that it was from Clark to Duff. Well, actually, it was from Kellogg to Duff. But then the boundaries were moved because of a council member who had a conflict of interest. That council member voted to move that boundary, but abstained from all the rest of the votes. The other issue I have is, why wasn't a traffic study needed? KFC had a drive-through, but not every drive-through is created equal. Different drive-through services have different drive-through patterns and different churn rates. If you stack vehicles through a parking lot, which blocks parking spaces, that will also influence any traffic patterns as well as affect the adjacent properties. KFC was there long before Clark went on a road diet from 4 lanes to 2. Currently, Clark and Gilchrist are already getting backed up, especially after a passing train. I would like to think a traffic study would be of utmost importance. And the last issue I had was, at the very back of your packet, it said, well, we haven't received any comments. I got my notice on Saturday. Your packet was published on the city website at 5 o'clock on Friday, I'm assuming, just like every other else. I found out about this first by the sign posted in the property. But where were those signs last year on those 62 properties? The planning department did not even follow their own protocol. But that was the par for the course through the whole rezoning process. If the new downtown gateway commercial is not good enough for Mr. Winkleblack, why would it be a good thing for anyone else? I am asking you that you vote alternative 3 and defer action back to any action on this item and request more unbiased information from city staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Laura Cram, 1601 Johnson Street. I have to admit that I have some really mixed opinions on the rezoning of these 2 properties back to the HOC. In fact, I do believe that all of the properties rezoned to this very restrictive DGC should be allowed to go back to HOC, especially if they feel that their business or their building would work best in the HOC zone. But that's not how it works. Or is it? On the other hand, city staff and city council spent months, even years, preparing the new zoning standards. In fact, as early as October of 2017, Mr. Diekman stated in one of your meetings that the HOC zoning did not reach the vision of the plan. And the commission action form dated February 7th of 2018, staff had prepared a list of goals they had for this new zone. One of those was to limit parking between the buildings and the streets. Another was to limit auto-oriented businesses, including drive-throughs. And yet another was to reduce parking requirements and encourage shared parking. I just don't see how these goals are being applied in this case. None of these goals are reached by changing these 2 properties back to HOC. I'm sure that staff was aware of how difficult it may be to get these types of businesses to conform to the new standards. Wasn't that their point? We all knew it was going to be difficult to relocate any of the businesses that were in this area due to the lack of current land inventory and the restrictions of the zone. Many of the property owners in the same area spoke to staff and council numerous times about these difficulties. But now, these standards are in place, and there's a buzz of this new development. Why would staff change that vision now? It was their vision in the first place. This is a long-term plan, and I'm sure that Starbucks will be here for a long time. I'm sure that there is a way to accommodate what they need within those DGC zoning standards. I can't recall the exact date, but I do recall hearing Mr. Diekman assure the council that staff had experience with this type of zoning. In all fairness, I believe that if one business or property owner in the DGC zone can relocate within the same zone and then request and have it granted to change back to HOC, that the same privilege of choosing the zone standards they prefer should be given to all business or property owners in that district. I would recommend that you choose alternative 3 and send this back to staff for further review. I don't think it's right yet. Thank you.
Good evening, Eric Van Gorp, 316 Lincoln Way. I didn't prepare a long, fancy speech. I'll keep it simple. I honestly, personally have no problem with this. I mean, I own the Dairy Queen, run the Dairy Queens on Lincoln Way. I know what it takes to have a fast food business. The issue, I think for all of us, and Chuck might even agree with me on this, I'm not speaking for him, but we asked way back in the beginning, a year and a half ago, to rezone the area that they wanted to do the development and leave the rest of us alone. We went to meeting after meeting after meeting. No one listened to us besides you guys. You guys actually recommended to leave us all alone. And this is a prime example. Like, we knew that this is what would come out of it, you know, and it's, you know, again, I don't have an issue with it, but I guess just be prepared in the future. Any of the properties along Lincoln Way that have been put back into DGC, I mean, we're all going to become looking for this exact same thing because we knew in the beginning that's what we needed or what we need. I mean, none of us have an issue with anything going across the street. I mean, I want to see the area develop, but this is exactly what we were trying to warn city staff and the council to look out for. But I guess we didn't know, you know, what was going to come. And here we are 18 months later, and this is exactly what's happened. So thanks.
Any further comments from the audience? Back to commission for additional questions or comments.
I guess I do have a concern to some degree that this could set a precedent for future rezonings potentially in this area. Obviously, I understand the benefits of what is being proposed here in terms of potentially improving the traffic flow. But is this going to potentially set a precedent for future rezonings? Would still be a concern of mine.
I'll ask Kelly that question. We're going to run into this again and again and again here?
I mean, I can't say that a property owner can't apply for the change, but you would have to go through the same exercise, see whether the corridor plan is specific about the area or not. The biggest issue that we were focused on were what were the trade-offs. The DGC doesn't actually outright prohibit drive-throughs. It's a configuration issue. So if this site had not been a drive-through previously, I think our recommendation would be completely different, because there is not a net gain of drive-throughs on this corner with this change. And that's probably our biggest rationale for supporting it. There is a way to do a drive-through on the property. It is a different setup than anywhere else in Ames. The applicant didn't believe that was going to meet his interest, so they proposed this. And that's where we came from, is the corridor plan didn't say that this corner had to be one thing specific. There was commercial zoning or there's DGC zoning. And if you look at the intent and the goals of the DGC zoning, and think of that as trying to articulate what the interest of the corridor is, again, because it had already been a drive-through site, we didn't feel we were eroding considerably what the intent was for the area. And with that said, I have no promise of anything across the street happening. So don't make a decision based solely on a hope of something across the street that none of us know what that is. So that's where staff's recommendation, you'll notice, is not because it would facilitate specifically something happening down the block. It's because the intent of what we talked about in the corridor plan could still be accommodated, maybe not as well as DGC would in terms of the design configuration, but at least from a use and an intent for improvement in the area, it can at least meet that intent of the corridor plan.
I think Chuck wants to say something if it's acceptable for the.
Yep.
Just a couple of things that were brought up. The engineer, Fox Engineering, is doing the work with the site plan, and there is a requirement that they meet with the DOT and go through their traffic study analysis. So that part is being looked at, and that is a part of it. You know, the other thing, you know, when we talk about, and I agree with a lot of the things that were said, we knew when we went through this and talked about that drive-throughs were going to be a problem. They just were. I think the other thing that when we've talked with this about the DOT, when they look at, as we work to the east, and I know that's not in front of you tonight, but there will be, I've not seen a rendition, and there have been a number of them that have more than two, and a couple of them don't have any access points from Clark to Kellogg out on Lincoln Way. So eliminating not only the drive-throughs that were there, but all the driveways that were there, I think will be a dramatic improvement. And to think that we're going to have one of the busiest streets in town doesn't have any drive-throughs on it, I'm just not sure that that's practical. It's one of the, I think we have two streets that go all the way from east to west in town, and drive-throughs are a part of our life. But the overall walkability, the goal of the downtown gateway center, the Downwell Gateway commercial zoning, is when we see what's going to happen to the east and the open areas and the walkability and all that stuff. The alternative is leaving Starbucks where it is and having that drive-through be in the middle of the block and having a building that's 50 to 60 years old, and us trying to develop something that looks unlike or not like what we have out on West Lincoln Way as your alternative. So am I happy about being here requesting this? Absolutely not. It's a matter of, we're caught in between a rock and a hard place of, do we leave something and everybody does just like they do out on West Lincoln Way and goes, who in the world let that happen? How did we end up with something like that? Well, there are a lot of properties that have been affected, and there will be a lot more that go. But don't let us end up with what we have now and try to build something that looks good around. Because when you talk about creating the synergy and stuff that we're talking about in the 2 blocks east, there couldn't be anything worse than having the Starbucks drive-through be a revolving door in the smack dab center of that block, of that 2-block area. So with that, I would either urge that you vote alternative 1 or vote it down, because I just don't know that there's more information that the staff is going to be able to bring back to you at this time. Thank you.
Let me just add one thing to what Chuck said. He said it's not a reasonable goal to have our busiest street have no drive-through. I agree. it's not a reasonable goal. But it's a reasonable goal to keep steadily reducing the number of drive-throughs on that street. And I would remind you that on Grand Avenue, which is our next busiest street, we have one drive-through entrance and no drive-through exits the whole length of the street. So we do have something to shoot for, and Lincoln Way is way behind. So, and I just close this way. I have nothing against Starbucks. I'm sure they run a good restaurant. They actually run a good restaurant in Lincoln Way, in Campus Town, and they don't even have a parking lot, let alone a drive-through. So they could develop right there a restaurant with a nice parking lot, no drive-through, and they'll be just fine because they're just fine all over the country with locations like that.
Back to the commission. Any further discussion? Any other questions for staff? Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Make a motion that we go with alternative 2. The Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend that the city council deny a rezone from the downtown gateway commercial to the highway oriented commercial with the master plan.
Anyone? Been a motion made? Anyone second? Right, motion dies. Anyone care to make a second motion?
I guess I just, again, I definitely understand the concerns from those who are business owners along this area and see this potential rezoning as something that, unfortunately, with the original rezoning of the whole area that took place, can see this as a definite frustration. So I'm kind of wavering between both because Starbucks is a pretty large entity, and I just feel like this concept idea of reducing the number of entrances is a definite benefit to the overall traffic flow of this area. But I also feel as if, again, will there be a future development in this area where the Starbucks could be on the ground floor and you'd have residential above? I mean, again, is it worth rezoning it now with the possibility of down the road something
Is that a motion?
different? No, I'm sorry. The other motion was struck down, so I guess I'm taking this opportunity to still see what the rest of the commission members are thinking, just in terms of,
I think when it was rezoned to downtown commercial,
HOC.
we knew it was going to be hard. So, we're sitting here and it's hard.
yeah.
Well, if we're just open for discussion again, we went through this once.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And yes, it'd be nice to get that Starbucks moved to a different location. But yes, I had a lot of misgivings about the change of the zoning the first time. And a lot of the people here know that. So I was just going with what Chuck was saying. He doesn't want number 3. Careful what you ask for. So number 2 or number 1 is what you're asking for, and I can't support number 1.
I'm going to move approval of alternative 1. That we recommend to the city council that we approve a rezone from downtown gateway commercial to highway-oriented commercial with the master plan to allow for office, retail, and restaurant, recreation, entertainment, trade uses with a single point of access from Lincoln Way, as well as access to Gilcrest with the general site layout as shown in the attached master plans, subject to approval of minor site development plan that conforms to all standards of the zoning ordinance. No specific modifications are authorized with the proposed master plan.
Been a motion. Wouldn't care to second? Can I second? I'll go ahead and second it. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Gonna abstain.
Can't abstain.
Darn it. Oh, goodness. Okay. Aye.
That's an aye vote.
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
I vote for
In
no.
favor
In favor.
In favor.
of number 1.
Okay, so this item will move forward to city council also for September 24th.
All right, commission comments,
No comments.
staff comments.
Nothing in detail tonight. We'll have some probably robust discussion on the 24th, also about Ames Plan 2040. Council will get back into discussing some priorities rather than details on the scenarios to help guide that work later this fall on picking preferred plans. So nothing else.
All right.
Good.
Anything else? With that, we're adjourned.